Well, Mark, I was twirling knobs and getting recordings and everything set up for this show because I figured I should probably post this on the Blue Sky app that we're going live. So somehow I wrangled myself an invite to that last week. So
Oh man, I've been
I
waiting for
know.
my
I
invite.
will
Do you
see
can
if
you
I'll
can you
see if
share
I don't have any
invites?
invites yet, but I know a guy who
Oh,
gave me an
gotta give me
invite. I'll
one.
ping him, see if he can get you an invite. And
Mm,
I'm more interested in the protocol than the network
mm-hmm.
itself. But
Me too.
it's interesting
Yeah,
to
me too.
see this kind of the application that they have put together so far to test out the protocol. So just posted the Dev Friday show there. I don't know if we'll get any viewers from that, but I figured we should start off the show like the way you wanted, right? Let's get some of the most controversial developer topics. Let's just get it out there. So tabs versus spaces, Mark. Tabs versus
Spaces.
that's unfortunate
Spaces.
because I can't. I agree. So there's no controversy there.
Well, the thing is that I just let the IDE
Yeah.
take care of that, or for my case, it would be my NeoVim or Doom Emacs, all right? How I have that configured.
And you
But
use
really,
both
the editor,
Vim and Emacs, so you're on both sides of that
because
argument.
who in their mind keeps pressing space bar like two
Right.
or four times to keep trying to
For
indent
sure,
their
yeah.
code? The IDE should do
I am
that,
obviously
but yes,
tabbing my code over, but yes, I'm expecting it to be converted to spaces because
because I've definitely seen some weird things when code has been formatted with spaces, and then it doesn't it always seems to
oh, you
bring
mean
up issues.
you mean formatted with tabs instead of spaces.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
it's
format
just
tabs.
and
Yeah,
then you're like, whoa, wait a
yeah,
second, wait a second. Like the tab width on a computer is different than whatever you're used to, and all of a sudden it's like way
yeah.
spacey code or something like that. So
I love my tab key, but yeah, that tab key better
there
be
you go.
spitting out
All right, well,
spaces.
so no controversy there. We already did the Vim versus
And of
Emacs.
course, we're not going to be.
You
Of
see,
course, yes,
both
that's what I was
both
going to say.
world,
We're not going to be
both
doing the
worlds
whole
there.
Vim Emacs because I live in
Right,
both
right.
worlds, and you
Hey,
just
well, we
live in
get
your
yeah, we got
JetBrains
maybe we do
IDE.
VS Code
So,
versus JetBrains.
oh yeah, I have you played with their new lightweight
The
code editor?
Fleet
Was
from
it
JetBrains.
Fleet?
I have not. I
Have you
have
have you played
not.
with it?
Well,
I'm
I
curious
saw
about
something
that.
the other day. They were saying something was now in VS Code. I forget what it was. Oh, now I'm gonna forget. But it's something that JetBrains has had for a while in their ID, and I was just like, we've had that. I don't know what it was that they put in there, but it was HTTP requests. It was it's like for you don't need Postman anymore. You can do HTTP requests right here
Okay.
with inside of VS Code, I think, and it's like, well, yeah, JetBrains has had that for a while. It's
Yeah, I don't think that's really
well, it
anything
is
to
nice.
and post. Well, I would agree, but also, like you said, in full IDs, they've kind of
Yeah,
had
so I
that
don't.
already.
Maybe I was
Yeah,
misreading whatever post I saw, but I was like, I don't feel like that's a
yeah.
groundbreaking feature here. That's kind of like a you need to keep up with everybody else type of a feature. I will say though, I love that I do that in my IDE instead of having to fire up Postman. I can just put request right there.
It's true.
PHP Storm will understand the response. It'll understand the request. I can capture kind of like this is the request body for testing and things like that. So I find that super useful. What are the other controversies?
Yeah.
We got to stir up
I
something
don't know. I'm
here.
not. I'm not in a very
Really?
controversial
Oh,
mood today. I'm drinking my green tea. I'm feeling at peace. I'm having my Zen moments with you right now,
I'll
so
try.
I'm
I'll try
good.
not
I don't
to. I'll
know.
try not to ruin it with if I
Maybe if
bring
you
up
bring up
something.
something
Yeah,
that starts to
yeah.
rile me up, yeah, starts to trigger me,
Maybe
then
yeah. Maybe
that
I'll
would
have to
be
try to
something.
avoid that. There was something else I just thought of now. Now it's gone away. Oh well. Oh well. I mean, we could go back. We haven't finished it, right? What was the question? Should managers code? Isn't that?
Should managers code? We could finish that, but one thing. Okay, well, because I do want to start off each week, kind of finding out what we've been
Okay.
working
Okay.
on.
Oh boy, what have I been working on? Who know? Who
And I
knows?
know
Who
you. Well,
knows?
you talked about what you were working on last week, which was I think you were writing a little bit of code, but you're doing mostly
I was
writing.
doing
Which
some
we
example
could
code.
talk about the article, but I want to hold off the PHP tech talk until a little bit later in the show. I think we can hold off a little
Wait, you
bit,
don't? You're saying you
but I
don't
do.
want us to talk about PHP Tech,
We
but just
can talk about. It. I
just
just don't want to
later
lead
in the
off with it. Just like I'm trying not to lead off with
Okay,
AI
okay, we're
either,
trying not to do that. All right, all right. I mean, if you want a ticket, there's a discount code, but
because you did write a really good article,
oh,
and
you
I did
did the
read it
Medium
last
article.
night.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
But so let's
Okay, okay,
let's
okay.
wait
We won't touch
till a
that.
little later. All right. So what I was working on this week because this was my last week of
Oh yeah.
classes. And
Wait,
it
does
could
that mean you got?
hopefully be my last week ever teaching classes. We'll
Whoa!
see how that
Wait, wait, wait,
goes.
wait, 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 wait. Are we teasing some news here? Is this why you're in
Well,
such a
not.
zen mood?
I am looking forward to the summertime. I
Okay.
think this summer
Okay.
it's gonna be the Dev Friday summer
Dev
because what I'm
Friday
hoping to do with you
summer.
each week, what I'm hoping to do with you each week is give you an update and give you a little play by play on what progress I'm making in regarding to my midlife career
Okay.
change
Okay.
that I'm getting excited about. So definitely looking forward to the summer. But
So
yeah, this was my last
this
week of.
this was. So you have no more classes? Is that what you're saying?
I just have one more classes on Monday because the semester ends on a weird.
That's strange.
Even though this was the last week of the semester, because the semester started on a Tuesday, we have one Monday series of Monday day classes to
Okay.
finish up. So I will
Do
be,
you then
and
have
that those classes mostly
finals
just
after
for.
that? Is it like one
Well,
last
if
lecture?
I had final exams in my course, but I'm all about the projects. I don't
No,
care
but I
about
mean, like,
students
is
can
there
do in a
still
test. I want them to see
this
what
is
they
your
can do in
last
a project. But
class, but then there's still going to be like I have to grade
correct.
their either their project or whatever.
Yes. So
Okay.
all the
Okay.
project work is due then, like say mid next week, and then after that, do the grading, and then I'm officially done.
Gotcha.
So, but this is my last week of teaching, and I was putting together some final demos. So I did a really interesting demo of kind of a small e-commerce website with using a Next.js. I use Supabase. I've talked about
You
Supabase
have
before.
love
I'm
super
loving
right?
Supabase. Like even for students, like it was a great learning. It was because it's a great it markets itself as like an open source Firebase alternative. But once you get into it, it gives you a lot of the nice features that Firebase gives you, like the authentication. If you want to do some edge functions, it does give you database. But I love the database aspect of it because it gives you a relational Postgres database that you can interact with SQL or Squeal or SQL, however you want
The
to
squeal
pronounce
develop.
it.
Now,
The Squeal.
it's an alternative to Firebase, but it's not trying to. It's not. Is it
Yes.
trying to replicate functionality like a one-to-one you can drop in replacement, or Firebase is just like, hey, it's the concept of
No,
Firebase.
because it does have its own API, and I would even say its API is easier
Okay,
to use than
so it's
Firebase's
like
API.
we are a similar product to Firebase, not a Firebase
Mhm.
drop-in replacement.
But it is open source, and they do really push the open source aspect of it. So if you want to do a self-host of Supabase, it does give you some getting started instructions. It does, it is Supabase is basic what's the best word? It's a large set of applications, a large set of open source applications they package up together and they, put it together as Supabase. But that package is an open source project, which if you wanted to self-host it, you could, which that's also long-term. If I really want to start building, future projects on this, it's the peace of mind knowing that, okay, let's say if something happens to Supabase as the organization or the company, I could just host this myself, right? So I'm not out of luck, right? So that's kind of nice. I really like that.
Also, just run it yourself.
Because once you wrap yourself around a platform like Firebase or an Amazon Web Services, what is their I forget the name of their Firebase.
Oh, they have.
I forget it
so
because I don't
many
use it, but
services.
I
Yeah,
looked
know
into
what
it.
you're saying.
They have a very equivalent Firebase kind of platform that's built off the top of Amazon Web Services. But once you really adopt that platform as your kind of your cloud host or cloud provider, then let's say if you want to move to a different host or different platform, it does take a good amount of work. But also, let's say if something happens or something changes to that platform that you don't like, or maybe the organization, you could have some freedom to move it. So I really like that. But getting back to just the ease of use with its database, so it gives you, I think, the best of both worlds because Firestore on Firebase is basically a non-relational key value store. Which is nice.
So that's interesting.
It's really
because
a document-based store.
I've used I think what the original Firebase product is, which is I'm going to give the simplest explanation that comes to my mind. It's like a huge JSON document that you can query the individual nodes of. So it's
basically a document.
It's not
store
as much as a traditional key value because you can kind of dive into the value, but you're not talking about Firebase, you're talking about Firestore, which is different. Like I had all the code that I've ever written with Firebase has been with what they call their legacy, I think, real-time database or something. I forget. But then the new one, the one that they want people to use, I've never moved to or used.
Well, still, no, I would assume the best way to describe it is a document store. I always think of it as a key value store because I don't know, that's where my mind goes because I always think about that structure. But yes, it is a document like you talk about. If you just want to upload a structured document, like a JSON document, It's basically what you have. But it's not a relational database, and Supabase basically kind of gives you the best of both worlds, where it's not like when you're using its API, it's not like you're accessing it like a document or key value, type of interface, but you are working with a relational database. You are working with its API, and their API is nice. It has a nice interface to it. I think even just teaching it, I think the students were able to grok it and be able to kind of get it working within their projects. And also, what I love about these platforms, that if they give you a good low cost or free, preferably free, kind of getting started hobby plan to get started with. So for educational purposes, is great. My students didn't have to put in a credit card number. They could just create an account, and they were just up and running and getting started with it. So before my course, they had courses in server-side scripting where they worked with PHP, MySQL. So, and also some of them had the database management course, which primarily is with MySQL. So they had some relationship database knowledge. So then taking that into, and then kind of having them to implement a web project, like an e-commerce website, which is what the demo that I was working on, they were able to work with that. So I was pretty happy with it. So yeah, put together this small demo, this e-commerce demo with Next.js, Supabase, and like I said, we're all going to be. I'm also going to be showing them on Monday. Well, Next.js is a server-side framework too. I think we talked about this. How it has.
Were you using it from a server side, or was it all just like client side hitting Supabase to get the data?
Next.js is a server-side framework, Tim.
Okay, it's not client.
It's basically Node.js. Okay. It's basically a nice, pretty framework around Node.js.
Gotcha. So it was a JavaScript server-side application that communicated with Supabase, and then you rendered pages.
Yeah, so it was nice. I showed them both how to use Next.js's way to get data with the. Now they're using this app. The app kind of folder app structure to it, which is a little bit different. But before, the way I was showing them using their page structure. So if they wanted to render pages on the server, they could do, get server-side props, or basically kind of does the call out to Supabase's API, does that on the server. The page then gets rendered to the server and gets returned back to the browser, just like you would do in a normal server-side application. Cool. But then it's also nice too, within the same React page component, you could have server-side props, but then you could also do client-side. So if you want to do like your client-side props or your state management, you can basically do both.
You can render the page, so it's a nice kind of come down, and then also start using an API to pull other data.
Yep. So it's kind of a nice kind of best of both worlds. And like I prefer doing that way for this class, just because switching, like even for me, switching context between languages is always tough. I always find the more that I've taught these courses, the more languages I ask the students to kind of balance between projects is always a big challenge. I know in the past when I taught this course, I did teach it. We did PHP, we did the PHP backend, PHP API,
React front end or something like that. Yeah,
we did a client. Well, I didn't do React then. I just did a basic HTML JavaScript front end. But even just for them to do a heavy JavaScript, even if you're not using a framework, if you're just doing, vanilla JavaScript, or I don't know, back in the day, I maybe, was using jQuery, that takes still a good amount of work to go from JavaScript to PHP, and also to understand the API calls, the asynchronous nature of it.
To keep in mind.
It is. Yeah. So that was the final demo. I put that together. It was interesting. As I was writing it this week and finishing up, I was rushing through it so much just to get it done. I was realizing, wow, I wasn't doing any client-side validation, wasn't doing kind of nice let's just what's going to be making a professional e-commerce website, be thinking about, okay, calculating the tax, the shipping fees, even a simple thing of having a state drop down on your form. I wasn't doing any of that, because I was just trying to get the base functionality done, just trying to show them how they could, do authentication, how they could bring back product data with categories, do a basic shopping cart, interface with, using local storage and using the database, and then also using just some basic checkout features, so you can add an order back in the database for authenticated users. So trying to get all that done, and in a very simplified example, I realized, wow, I'm skipping over a bunch of things. I was telling the students at the time, like, these are things you should probably be thinking about if you be making this application. Don't just think of this as a completed application. There's a lot more work you have to do to it. But what I want to do was just show them kind of the big parts and how they kind of fit together.
Right. This is how we're going to iterate on this.
So that was fun. I was putting it together, and also just realizing this could be my last demo for a while.
This is your demo of showing them how it works together, and that's to help them with their final project.
Yes, because the expectation was that they would, at minimum, they would make an e-commerce style website. So I wanted to kind of show them how to implement that style functionality. I have one student who's doing actually,
Now,
which
wait,
you might be
are
with
they
this.
already doing that? I'm just curious,
What do you mean by
final project? When do they start on that? If this is your last,
Oh, that was like
okay,
mid-semester. We started on
okay,
the
so
final
they've
project.
been
Yeah.
doing
So
it, and you're
leading
just
up,
like, here, let me show you a little bit more. Hey, maybe you could think about this.
yeah,
Here's an example,
yes,
and to hopefully help them.
yes. So this week, well, last week we did the authentication. This week we
Okay,
did because I wanted to make sure that they could authenticate the users before adding an order, so to have some table level security on the order table, so they can't, so the order
right.
table
Oh,
isn't
that's probably a
public
good thing.
with
Yeah, yeah.
the API. So last week we covered the authentication both with a cloud provider authentication and doing email authentication. So show them both ways to get that set up, and then this week was basically just the checkout, putting the order back in. So that's what I was finishing up with the demo this week, but it was fun.
How do you think they're going to do with their projects?
I think they're getting through it. Like I said, it's a small class, about 5 students, because these are the graduating kind of final students of the web development. The students who made it through the past 2 years, because the web development program within 2 years, there's a lot you have to learn and kind of get through. So it was a small class, which I actually like the small classes because I could spend more time one-on-one with each student. I think it's actually a better experience for me and for them too. And I think most of them did pretty good. And one student's actually doing a really interesting thing. He wanted to add a little bit more challenge. He's doing an RV rental site for doing campground spaces and RV rentals. So if you want to rent an RV, or if you want to list a rental space at a campground, he's doing that. I guess his father was kind of into
so
like
not
so
like
that's
a campgrounds rental, but like I have a space at a campground.
so sort of
It could be
Airbnb for
campers and
camp
spots.
for RV spots. Yeah.
Okay. And would you?
Yeah.
You may be, I guess, renting the camper too if you're like permanently parked there or something like, or
Yeah, he has. Yeah, I guess he's primarily doing about the spaces,
Gotcha.
about like spaces at parks, like state parks, or just private areas,
That's
and
interesting.
to both the list spaces and also to rent spaces. But then I think he also has a component of for RV rentals too.
And so that he's renting spaces that you already have booked, which isn't like that's an interesting secondary market, especially for state parks.
Yeah,
Because state parks, at least Pennsylvania state parks, let you book a year out from your booking. So if you want, if you want this week next year, you're booking it now because they go fast. And then once you get it, and you're like, oh, my plans changed. Like a second market might be a really interesting thing.
Yeah, I think he's doing a version. I'm not sure if the person, because I don't know very little about this market. He does because I guess his father is kind of into this for vacations and for traveling, and that's where he got the idea from. Yeah, I guess. But you're bringing up a good point. Yeah, if you kind of have that, like almost do it a sublease. So if you already have the rental agreement, you could just sublease it out to somebody else.
Does that factor in, like when you look at that final project, which is the e-commerce site, but it's more than all right, I'll build like a e-commerce site. Yeah, here you could buy something if you wanted. Here you could. It's actually a thing that couldn't. Does that from your perspective? I don't want to say like give them additional points, but is it like, hey, they're attacking a real problem? Does that help a little bit in how you look at the project?
So that they could come away with the course knowing how to build something real.
No, not but like as you evaluate it, if you have one student that just was like, okay, pretty much they built an example that's very similar to my example. It's just a simple e-commerce. You got a couple products, you got a coaster and a glass, and then you hit add cart. It works. Yep, you bought it. And you have this guy who's going in and saying, I want to sell something different. I'm gonna figure. Does that? Would you expect maybe more completeness and polish from the one who is just doing the example versus him? It's like, oh look, he went out and tried something that was outside of just the in theoretically, here's an e-commerce site that I put together. It's not real, but he actually tried to apply it to the real world. And okay, maybe it's not got as much polish. Maybe not everything's complete, but man, he ran into some problems here. Like how do you visually display, a space? How do you list it? It's more complex than just think of 3 products. All right, we sell 3 products. Here's the list. Pick them and buy them. Does that impact how you view and grade his final project?
Okay, how I would assess that. I think it's interesting. The reason why I structure the courses the way I do now, with being heavily project based like I said, I don't do final exams in my courses. And I also give really good, or just say really thorough examples that demonstrate the functionality that I'm asking them to implement. So basically, if they could follow my examples, follow my code, I don't, they should be good, right? They should be take this up. I made this tweet yesterday, which I was dealing with a couple students. You need to learn how to read code before you can write it. Because I find that what students have a real hard time with is being patient and just understanding how to read through code, how to step through it. And that's really what I do with most of my classes. Like either I'll do a live coding example like you do in your talks, or I'll do a, like I'll have if it's a more, let's say, elaborate example that has a lot, good number of lines involved, I'll give them the source code for it, but I'll walk them through it. Like basically step by step, this is what each line's doing. And I'll kind of step through each function or method and be able to kind of walk them through, what's being returned and kind of walk them through all the parts of it, both from a front end and back end perspective. And I try to translate the code that I'm giving to them as source so they can, if they read it themselves, they'll be able to understand it. But I find that that's a huge challenge. And maybe it's a fault of our computer science program here that our students are not taught how to read code for themselves.
What is the
like
gap?
to really
the gap that
kind
they're
of
not even following what it's doing?
I feel that once they're given more real code, as in what would be used on the job, which that's what I try also to do with my courses. I try to just show them more, let's say complex examples, but more kind of complete examples rather than these small toy projects that you get out of
right. Because those are all contrived, and you're like, oh yeah,
yes,
cat,
practical,
dog,
right?
Animal.
So once I start to show them more completed examples, it starts to break down because they don't know how to translate, because they're just used to seeing kind of half-page code examples from a textbook and that they could just copy and paste into to see it get running. But then once you start dealing with a full application that has, I don't know, multiple, class files, component files, and then have connections between those files, there's the relationships, hierarchies with the structure of the project, and then also within the code itself, being able to step through that is a big challenge. And I also find too, like I introduce frameworks and libraries more in my course than I know that other faculty do, because that's in the real world. You're going to be working with libraries, going to be working with frameworks, and you just have to kind of jump into it and kind of learn how they work and just learn how to learn the framework and learn the library. So what I find is just understanding the libraries and understanding the connections between the library and your code and how you could implement or interface with the library. That's a huge step. But it's interesting. Once the students,
and where do you find them falling down? Like it's just like they don't have the appetite to understand it, or is it they can't keep the code pages in their mind? Because I wonder if that's it. Because when you start having code that relates, like, okay, I see these 3 lines, I can tell you what they do, but unless I'm remembering what is going on over here with the rest of the system and the interaction, I don't understand why they're doing that.
So I'll give you an example here. I was pushing hardcore in my class about doing user-friendly URLs. Or like URIs, like kind of like, instead of doing the URL parameters where you had like the question mark parameter name equals, right? Which that's what they're taught before in their previous courses. I say, okay, when I look at a web application, I'm always thinking about the URL because I want to make sure that is both it's functional for me and what I'm trying to implement, but more importantly, also functional or just accessible for the user. Right. So how you structure URLs, but also structure them back so that when you're working with the router within the system that you're working with, it'll translate that URL properly to parameters that you can then use in your code.
Because you'd rather like shop.com/product/1234 instead of shop.com?product equals 1234, because a user readily goes, oh, this, because we know as consumers of the web, we're like, I need to copy the whole URL. Once we see a question mark, we're like, I don't know, do I copy it or not? How does this work?
Well, I wasn't even forcing them to say just use, slugs.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Normal words, patterns that are separated by dashes, just so because I had a student show, okay, so if you're going to have a category page of products, showing them how to make the category, define a slug for that. So if the category is fine art pictures, right? So do like fine art dash pictures or fine art paintings.
5.
Right. And then / and then the actual product name and a slug version of the product name. So it's a real name version, and making sure that that slug then is unique. So then it could, each page that you want to, or each category could have a unique URL slug that you could use. So I was showing them that was also new to them. They haven't seen that before. And then showing them how that can be translated to a parameter that they could see in the code and then see it just work. Once they were able to kind of get over that hump and be able to see that, it actually a light bulb went off and they were like, oh, I totally understand now. And it actually makes sense.
And the accessibility play there is then as a user, consumer of your site, I know what that URL's to. I
Yeah.
can reference it
Yeah.
as opposed to be like,
Yeah.
I don't remember, is category 5 and item 13, was that the sneakers I was looking at? I don't
Also
know.
for good old SEO, if the good search engines still care
Do they still
about
do
that,
that?
I don't know if they
even
still
know.
care about
I
it
don't even know.
anymore.
I remember SEO magic books and people were like, I am the SEO wizard. I know how to.
I still have
all that-
faith
all that
because I
jazz.
put so much work or so much thought in the URL. So I think that's
Mhm.
important for me. I don't know, because I appreciate that as a user.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping the search engines feel the same way. I don't know.
Open the search engine feels the same way.
So I put so much thought and effort into
So
it.
as you going through that, then that led to seeing some not be able to follow what the code was doing.
Yeah, it's like, and then there's some students, like I said, there's a big, it's just I get to in any college course or, specifically I teach at a community college. So like the gap between students who are really, let's say, self-starters, who are really into it. This is what they do in their spare time. They're really experimental. They push it, they really want to, really engage with the content, also their own work. Those you have no problem. Like I said, the RV
Right.
rental site, that was a total self-starter. I gave him the base requirements for e-commerce website. He's like, all right, well, it's okay, but could I do this? I was like, oh yeah, great. Do that, push it. And then do something interesting with it. But I try to set the projects though. Let's set up like a bar, like a base level that almost everybody can meet. I'm trying to establish that. Also knowing that I'm going to basically show them almost everything they need to do to implement that final project. Right. So if they're just able to follow my source code or watch back my video lectures, which I can record all my lectures, and so that students can watch the back, which is also kind of surreal, which is something I also saw not in my web courses, but in my animation and interactive courses. It's surreal. At the end of the semester, I'll be teaching my lecture on campus, and then I hear myself talk from another computer in the classroom of a student who's watching a previous lecture of mine because they're trying to catch up.
That's weird.
Yeah,
that's
it's
weird.
very, very surreal. It's very meta. Yeah.
Yeah, that's gotta be weird.
So that's a common thing I also see at the end of the semester. Well, they're trying to catch up and trying to remember what they should have learned.
Like 1.5 times.
That would be amazing.
Is it you faster? Is that what it is?
But it is weird. They play it loud though, which I'm thinking, wow, I wouldn't even want to listen to myself that loud. Like, jeez.
They're like, oh, turn it up. This is my professor. He's good.
Like, I already know I talk fast as it is, and like if somebody would try to play me at 1.5 or twice speed, I would sound crazy. Sound like Mickey Mouse, like on steroids. Not steroids, no, crack or cocaine. I don't know. Steroids. That would be a very beefy Mickey Mouse there.
It's the new live action Mickey Mouse meets Popeye. I don't. Yeah, I'm not sure what's coming out of Disney anymore, but I can see that one coming, I guess. All right. So you should read code before.
This leads into the question I was going to ask you, because
Okay.
based on what I saw this week. So how do you, either yourself, you could either answer this question for yourself or for other junior developers that you've seen, what do you feel is the best way? And I think we have kind of talked about versions of this, but for like to learn, let's say if you had to learn something within 1 week, you had 1 week saying, okay, I got to learn this library, a set of existing code base, right? So you're on a new job, you're kind of thrown into it. You have this, I don't know, this 20,000 line code base. I don't know. Let's do kind of, try to find something that's kind of manageable. And you had to kind of learn it, kind of step, or at least feel by the end of the week, maybe you might not be able to, you won't know everything, but at least you feel comfortable saying, if you were given a task saying, okay, add this additional feature, or to try to fix a bug, or just try to do something with that code base, you feel like you could do something on your own. You wouldn't have to kind of always be asking the senior developer, how does this work? What does this work? You at least have a good understanding where you could at least start working on your own. So what do you think would be kind of a good kind of plan of attack when it comes to like learning something new? And that could be a new language, it could be a framework, could be a library. I don't know. So I was thinking about this.
That's a good question.
Because the way I was approaching this, my courses now is and like I said, I don't want to always teach how I feel like I best learn, but I want to give them examples. I want to give them good, clean examples if I can. I want to then talk them through the examples and kind of give them good illustrations. And thinking about what I want to learn, I love written tutorials more than video tutorials because it's just faster, because I could skip over the parts I already know, and I could just go to the parts where I don't know, and it's just faster for me. But at the college there, doing video lectures and recording our lectures and doing face-to-face lectures is still a thing. I wish I could just write down my lectures and just give them to them, expect them to read them, but then they're not going to read them anyway. But I find best to either look at existing projects, existing tutorials, source code. That's the best way that I find. But I know for other students, they need like a hand step-by-step kind of walk me through type of experience. And that's also hard because I hate doing this. I feel like I don't know, for me, like I don't really learn that. I don't know, but learn that way. But what about you?
So I mean, it's an interesting question because it's like if I was given a new library, all right, we want to integrate with this. Now you need to start writing code that way. First, yeah, you look at the docs, right?
Yeah.
You try to see, well, okay, this is how you're telling me to use it. New code base is different because then it's like, is there even docs or is it a lot of tribal knowledge? One thing that I've been working on even this week is trying to document more and trying to give kind of a this is why this is how we do things. This is why we do things. And if you need to do something similar, like you need to build a new API, right? Because we're doing that all the time. New product is can be backed by an API because we don't do server side renders, as much as we used to. It's going to be some type of single page app type thing that consumes an API. So then, how do we build an API? What are the parts that go in it? I don't want a dev to be like, oh, I know how to build an API and build it differently than all the rest of our APIs are built, right? We have common patterns that we use. So trying to document that and describe what those patterns are, and then give, like you said, like a guide. You need to create this. You need to make these 3 parts. This is what they should do, and that's a little bit of what I'm working on. But when it comes to, I think this is just, I don't know if it's because we seeded the conversation this way already with what your tweet was. But if I want to know how a library, and I really want to work with a library, I'm going to go read the code of the library.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, look, you want to know how this router works? Like, not a, like a path router, like you were talking about, right? Because we've got a router. Incoming URL comes in, says, well, what should I do with it? Well, ask the router to get the route definition. Dig into it, read it, see how it works. At least you may not care how it works all the way internally, but at least that first service layer where, okay, I give you a URI, you give me back something. Let's at least dig into that and see, oh, okay, I see you're asking something to match it. I'm not going to dig into the weird regex stuff and try to understand how that works. I just can accept that it works. But I get you're asking a list to match a thing, and then when that comes back, you're using the key to find the arguments, and then that is how you create this. Okay, I see what's going on here. I at least know that layer. So it's interesting. There's a post on LinkedIn. Did you know we're posting on LinkedIn now? Like people blog on LinkedIn or something?
I've rediscovered LinkedIn myself, Tim. I think it's important for like networking and finding connections with people that you've worked with in the past, and maybe you might want to work with in the future. I think it's a thing. Yeah, I'm getting back into myself. I'm amazed.
Yeah, people are posting on LinkedIn. I'm like, I didn't realize Microsoft LinkedIn was a social network. I guess it is.
It is.
But a friend of mine who actually happens to be giving the closing keynote at a conference soon, that I might be giving the opening keynote to. He asked the question a week ago. Basically, do you think it's important for a developer to understand the full stack of an application they're working on?
That's a good question.
Important?
Yeah.
And my response was a little bit more, I don't know, fuzzy, in that I come from, I remember, and we're going all over the place, but that's what this podcast is about.
That's what we do. That's what we do.
Yeah.
We don't prepare for this, Tim. We just, yeah.
There was like a fun hackathon. I forget what we called it. It was, I don't even remember what it was called. In New York City, went there, and the Hacker Olympics. And it was a bunch of different projects, and you had different competitions, and one of them was to take apart, the computers already taken apart. It was like an old Packard Bell or something like that, right? And it was like, can you reassemble it? And I was surprised by how many devs didn't know what went where and didn't know what the components were. And it's like, you don't need to. You're writing on a computer, but there's certainly value with knowing, oh, that's a hard drive. A hard drive, well, at that point, you looked at it, you're like, that's an IDE hard drive. It needs to go into something. It's an IDE controller board. Oh, there's an IDE controller board. It's a PCI. I don't even remember. I think it's probably just PCI board, and not probably an ISA. But you just drop it in. You put the computer back together. Is that useful for me in writing code? Well, yes and no. There's value there. Is it useful that I know what a shift register is, and how a microprocessor works? it doesn't necessarily mean I can't write code if I don't, but it's kind of nice to have that background.
Well,
So
you just gave me like assembly flashbacks there for my
right,
college
right,
college
right,
assembly course.
right.
Shift register.
You know, is it useful that I understand that a single bit of memory is basically 2 transistored wire back to back? Yeah, it's cool to know it. Does it
Yeah.
help me? Not really in my code, but it's good to have that familiarity. But where I came down on it is I think the key is to have a little bit more knowledge than what you need.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the set of knowledge is that you need to solve the problem that's in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
It's super helpful to have just a little bit more. Just expand the bounds. The minimum you need to get the job done. Make sure you have a little bit more, because then the next job, make sure you have a little bit more, and always understand like that next layer, whatever it is, that next layer of abstraction. The don't just look at the code I call when I use this library. Look at the code that's in what I call.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe don't go further, but just say, hey, if I'm using some type of library that interfaces with Supabase, right? Okay, I can say write this key. Maybe dig into that method and look what that write method says, and you'll be like, oh, it's a couple API requests. I don't need to dig deeper, and I don't need to understand how they do the API, the HTTP client, and how it wrangles the response.
Mm-hmm.
I just can see that when I call this method to say write this key, I now understand it's going to execute a couple HTTP requests. And from the look of this code, it's also going to somehow take the token that I already gave it when I created this thing, and it's going to do some signing. Okay, I get what happens when I call write. That's all I need to know. But I at least should know a little bit more than what I have to immediately use to accomplish the problem. And that should give me just that edge of I know more of the context, I know more of the stack, I know more of the code, I have a better understanding. So now I can actually not just write to, well, I know I called this method to put this key in. I know what some of the side effects are. I have a better understanding. So I think it's just teasing at that. It's like whatever the problem is, just make sure you have that buffer of just the next layer.
Or maybe I would kind of reframe that, going back to what we talked about last week, was saying, and the fact of like, it should be not required. Well, okay, if you think about the good aspects of a developer, like it should be that desire to know more or to know deeper.
For sure.
Like you can't know everything, right? Nope. So you have to accept you can't know everything. We can't do everything. But at least be open to saying, if I need to know that, or if I need to learn that, I'm willing to dig into it.
Oh yeah. 100%.
And understand, and being just almost like saying, if I need to, almost like I want to, almost like, because that's also my thing of like, there's so many things I'd like to work on. And my biggest skill I'm trying to still develop my old age is just still restricting myself. But then because I know that, if there's a problem that I'm actually super into, I'm just going to dive into it and kind of spend some time and do a lot of research and do a lot of testing and try to figure it out. I also find that what you were saying too is like, if you do know a little bit about the background of a computer, about how a computer functions, how it works, it does make you a better coder, because you think about the code that you write in more of a deeper way.
Yeah, it's valuable to know what's going on.
Because you're not just copy and pasting code from Stack Overflow or examples online or whatever, or nowadays what ChatGPT gives you.
ChatGPT's good.
And just not understand, because that's what I find a lot of students do now. They're just copy pasters. And it drove me crazy. I mean, we're going on another tangent here.
All right.
I don't want to talk about AI, but it actually drives me crazy. The fact I knew this was going to be a thing. I saw there's a course now for ChatGPT prompts for developers.
Right. Like a course.
A course, like an online course. Like, let's teach developers how to be better prompters.
Yeah. Well,
I'm like, what the heck?
Prompt engineer.
I'm like, we are going to make stupid developers. This is why the AI will take over, because developers just won't know how anything works. Right?
Well, I mean,
I think there's some level of that. Like, I think like you're talking about the appreciation of understanding how a computer works, how the base level of a programming language works.
Yeah.
Just like I was talking to my students this week about JavaScript, like introducing new nice features like the map method or the filter method in JavaScript. Well, in the end, that's really just a for loop behind the scenes.
Right.
And then once I could explain that to them, but then just to make that connection, it takes them a while to get there.
A little different,
but once
it's really a pipeline.
But once they get there, but then also, let's say for the 3-dot expander operator, right? Yeah. That is also another, like,
you guys call it the splat operator?
I forget the term for it, but it's like, the 3-dot operator for expanding, like within an array or something like that, or expand out an array object. But it's basically just a for loop in a sense, or it's a very inefficient for loop that could cause a lot of performance issues. So if you start using these new fancy methods that are meant to be user friendly, which are really, really nice to have, but in inappropriate ways or overusing them in bad ways, that can cause big performance issues, right? But you don't really understand that unless you understand, well, how are those methods derived from? You know what I mean? So having some level of understanding or willingness to understand, oh, I see this map method here. Where does that come from? How's that built? Right. So I think that there should be some level of like or expectation of, that they should want to find out a little bit more about the tool that they're working with.
So you're saying
now I'm riled up. Now I'm all stressed.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that a developer or I don't know exactly how to phrase it, but you're saying there's an expectation of curiosity.
There should be an expectation of curiosity. But I think that's being lost. I really do. I think in the world, you started with the internet and now the AI is going to take over and it's going to make super developers or developers stupider and stupid developers. And they're not, and it's going to be bad. It's going to be the apocalypse. It's going to be the end.
Yeah. I mean, one Friday we'll just pull the plug and be like, that's it. We're done. There's nothing else here.
See, that's what Dev Friday's here is to fight the good fight, to encourage developers to learn more and to keep pushing in and try to actually be developers instead of just being prompt engineers.
This is the content everybody's. Oh, I was going to say the other day I walked into an Outback and they were like, have you been here before? And I'm like, I'm sorry, you must not recognize me. And they're like, we should recognize me. I'm like, I am the co-host of the 269th most popular technology podcast in Australia, Outback. I mean, don't I get a free bloomin' onion? What's up with that?
There you go.
So
I think it should be worth a discount code, coupon code there. Yeah.
Turns out they weren't even from Australia. I don't even know. That whole restaurant seems like a scam to me. But anyway, that's the content that those Australian people are here for. Is Mark's end of the world.
I got to step away from the ledge. I started to get a little too deep there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's like if you're just reassembling example code that's on Stack Overflow or in documentation, then yeah, I mean, AI is going to do maybe a reasonable job at that right now. Mm-hmm. The Chat GPTs. You ask it really complex programming questions, it is frequently, I mean, wrong or just completely off base. So it's just that if programming for you is copy paste, then yeah, figure out how to and I get do we want to ask it better questions, but it's like, like how do I phrase? Can I get better at phrasing it some questions? Because I have it spit out the squeal for me, right? The my squeal. When I'm like, I'd have to look it up in the documentation and find someone who does it because I'm not a DBA. I don't do it. It's all right. How can I better prompt the thing to get the answer I want? I feel like a lot of that prompt engineering though goes with the stable diffusions and the mid journeys. Like,
no, this is for developers. That's what this course about.
If it was for developers, prompt engineering for developers.
Oh my gosh, I can't take it. But I do like the a developer did an implementation of the GitHub Copilot for my NeoVim. So they made a version of that because GitHub Copilot it does have a NeoVim plugin, but they did actually a different variation of that, which actually they took away. The feature I didn't like about it was always the big block autocomplete. Right. So by default, what it does, it just gives you one line autocomplete, and that's a perfect. That's what I want, right? So if I basically want so if I know the line I want to write, I basically just want to have it autocomplete it for me, even though I know it's in my head, because then it makes me faster. But I don't need a bunch of code for just to spit out. And then I got to take the time saying, is that the right code? Is it a lookup? Or more often it isn't. It's going to have something, but I need to go in and change anyway. And it's going to be a block that I don't really want to deal with right now either way.
About reading code, and that would just be reading code. So.
Yes, but I think that's a good balance of like if they could just give me just improve the IntelliSense autocomplete that Microsoft made famous. Just improve that a little bit more. That's all I want, just to kind of help me out just a little bit more, speed me up a little bit. A little bit along, a little bit faster. That's all I want. All right. Okay.
Feeling better? Breathing a little bit better now?
To come back. But yeah.
All right. We lost that.
Because I do worry about the future, Tim. I worry about the future of developers. I do. I'm a little bit scared, especially me trying to think about or transitioning out of academia.
Is this your last Is
Because I
this your
do
last
worry.
course?
I do worry about, when I eventually do leave and then transition back to the real world, become a real developer again, like a real
Right.
boy.
Right.
I'm like Pinocchio. I'm like hiding. I'm like a Pinocchio developer right now. I'm just hiding as a developer. I want to get back. I'm going to become a real boy in the real world.
But you said this might be the last.
Well, that's because
This
this
might be
this
your
is
last course. So
the
what's going on
summer
here?
of change, I think. Yeah, so it'll be interesting. Hopefully we'll do a play by play on this show,
right.
and we'll see each week what progress I'm making towards that.
Tune
And
into Mark's.
like I said, I love teaching. Like I said, it's the one job besides getting in the zone and programming on a project that I'm really into. It's the one job I walked into, I could just do. It's almost like just a way to describe my wife. I think I probably like teaching more than she does. She's been doing it for longer than I have, and I think that's why she's retiring officially, because she can. She's worked there for so many years. It's one job I had. I could just go in there. I could just lecture as long as I have some prep. I know what I'm going to talk about, and it's kind of like breathing. Right. So if you're doing something in your career, your job, where it doesn't feel like work. Now, at the end of the semester, when I'm helping the students
it feels like work now, right?
When I'm trying to like teach the students something I taught them midway through because they weren't paying attention, then it feels like work. But when I'm just kind of going about each week, helping students out, doing lectures and kind of answering questions, yeah, I mean, it's totally natural, right? So I always love teaching. I always will go back to it in some way. But yeah, I'm thinking maybe if once I can transition to a different kind of full time, maybe I'll take a couple of years off and then maybe just do some adjunct work. But who knows also how academia is going to evolve and change too? Because I think 5 years, 10 years from now, I think the college system is going to be drastically changed.
Think some of this AI stuff is going to change that?
Yeah, it's going to take over everything. I don't. There'll still be institutions, teaching institutions that'll still exist, and they'll still, But I think that even the kids nowadays,
it's prompt engineering for professors.
There you go.
That's what you need.
They are probably developing some professional courses for that for faculty. Yeah, somebody's probably working on that right now. Even though the administration is trying to tighten down how ChatGPT is used from a academic perspective for students, but faculty, they can definitely use it wherever they want to. Yeah,
plan for me.
Yeah, there you go.
Pretend I'm teaching this and tell me what I should say. Oh, this is nice.
Well, actually, one thing I will say, recommendation letters. It's really good for
recommendation letters,
which I read an article about this. I was the only one who discovered the fact. I was like, recommendation letters
for students.
Usually there's 1 or 2 students that ask for it when they're either transferring to a 4-year school or possibly for a job. I will give reference enough if it's a good student for like a job. If like an employer calls me or contacts me and asks me for what do I think about the student, I'll give my honest opinion. But usually there's 1 or 2 students. They're usually good students who are transferring off to a good 4-year school and they want like a recommendation letter. But it's always kind of like, it's like one of those things of like that feels like work.
Right, because I now have to sit down and I
got to think about this.
I can just be like, no, I'd recommend them. But
so
nobody wants that. They want like, why do you recommend them?
All I did was I just wrote like a summary paragraph, like 4 or 5 sentences, said this is the student, this is what they studied, this is my opinion of them, and it gave me like a full page recommendation letter. I was like, all right,
there you go.
Tweaked it a little bit just to kind of make it not be so AI-ish.
Right.
And then sent it off. And I was like, whoa, that took me like, before that would probably take a good, like, I don't know, maybe even if at least a half hour, maybe an hour, depending upon, because like I said, I'm not the fastest writer, even though I like to write occasionally. You're probably we talk about your writing because I do want to ask you about your thing.
Okay. All right.
Which maybe we could transition to that, because like I said, I like writing, but at the same time, it takes me some time. I have to kind of think through it and plan it out, the editing process. My wife's a much faster. That's what she does. She writes books. She's an author and she can pump her content out so much faster.
Does she even need to write books now? Can't she just feed her other books to ChatGPT and be write the next one?
That is actually
write the next one in my style.
That is a project idea I'm thinking about, Tim.
Yeah.
A personal AI based. If you're an author, writer, you have a good amount of content that you've written.
Yeah.
What would happen if you built a language model around your own content?
I'm telling you, like,
I'm actually kind of working on that, Tim. I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. I mean, you should be able to train.
Yeah.
Any of these large language models.
I've been looking at some
specific
papers and some YouTube videos of the actual developers from OpenAI and how they built their language model. And a lot of it's open source. You just kind of have to just dig through it and kind of start to understand it. But something to think about.
Yeah, it should not have a problem mocking a writer's style, and then if as
Hmm.
long as you give it the context.
Or even building upon stories too, which is interesting because
Yeah,
she's a novel writer, right? So
right.
she builds characters, worlds, stories around them. And then let's say that the AI knew all about that, and he said, okay, well, here's a start to the next iteration of a
Hmm.
new story. How would it output? That would
Like
just be very, very interesting.
if you fed it for whatever your universe is, and I don't
Yep.
know if they use this I know they use it in TV production, but like whatever that Bible is, right? That like this is the
Yep.
character,
Yeah.
this
Story
is
Bible.
setting,
Yep.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
you fed it that, and then been like, hey, here's a scene that takes place in this context with these characters, and here's the motivations, and even I don't know, start feeding it your first
Yeah.
kind of rough draft and outline, because I don't know, that's how I write a lot of times
So let's talk
is
about
I
this.
will just dump ideas
So
right onto a
so let's
page.
talk about this article because I did take some time. I think who
Oh yeah.
tweeted it? I think it was one of the PHP Ugly guys tweeted that made a retweeted or made a
Oh
comment
okay.
on your
Yeah, yeah,
post
yeah.
here.
Yeah, yeah.
I think I saw I saw when you posted. I was like, whatever, just
Yeah.
Tim posted it. But then somebody else talked about
Tim
you. All right,
Tim
now
posts what
I
he
gotta take some
writes.
notice
Who
here.
cares? Oh, somebody else read what Tim wrote. Maybe I should read this. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
So
you wrote an article about why teams or why companies should send their teams to PHP Tech.
well, I wrote an article. We are sending our team to
Hmm.
PHP Tech. I think if other companies want to say, "Oh, that resonates with us and seems like
Hmm.
it's important,"
So
then
talk
that's
about your
on them.
process and what how that came to be.
I'm writing this one. Well, honestly, because this was up in the air for us a little bit with all that happened this year, I wrote this in January. So I don't remember quite my process,
Oh,
but
really?
my normal process, because I've been doing more writing for technical documentation and getting all my talks together for PHP Tech.
Was it an internal document that you wrote for your company? You said you wrote in
Um,
January.
it was no, this was always desired to be this.
Okay.
It wasn't like a pitch document. There's
Okay.
another document that talks about from our perspective, making the case as to why this is important for internal audience. But no, this was always designed to be the external audience. But a lot of times, what I'll do when I write is I'll throw just ideas on a page, and then from there try to build on it a little bit and craft a little bit more narrative value around it if it needs it. And here I knew I wanted to make 3 points to why it's important for us to be there. It's important for our team to be there because we engage with the community that way. This is PHP community meets at these conferences, right? And it's important for us, a company that is built on PHP, to be engaged with the community. So you scratch your head and say, well, how are you engaged with the community? We can't just send one person there to be like, hey, I represent our company and we want to have a part of this community. No, the easiest way for a company to engage with the community is make sure your developers are engaged with the community. Then the community is right there with you. It's not going to be like we put a booth there and we expect the community to come to us. They don't care about us. What do they care about? They care about developers, right? Because then we're all
Hmm.
part of the community. So how do we as a company that's built on PHP make sure that we stay in tune with what the community is doing? And when there's conversations that we feel like, hey, I just want a heads up on, or maybe we should influence, we're not going to influence by like coming down and being a company and saying, hey, we think you should do this. No, we're going to influence by having our developers engaged with the community. How do we do that? Well, let's send them all to a conference. That seems to make sense. The other thing that we want is we want our developers to be getting better at what they do. And we can encourage that. We can say, hey, read some articles, take an online course, but that's kind of on each individual developer. And it's easy for those things to just be like, I didn't get to it, didn't have time. But when we say, let's meet at a conference, now we automatically are keeping each other accountable. I'm
Yeah.
going to ask you, well, which talk did you go to? And not only that, but when we talk about the talks, it's not like I'm talking about some course I took and you weren't even aware of it, so you're not even kind of sure of the format. No, we were all there. So when we talk about what we learned, we're speaking a similar language because we were all part of that process. And that's harder to do if we would be like, oh yeah, we're all going to take these courses on this specific educate. We could do that too, but it's a lot easier just to say, let's meet here together and let's do this together. It's also important. I actually, when I look at it, I didn't make this point, but internally, I make the point that for dev teams, it is good to get face to face. And if the article touches, it's not a main theme, but it's good for our team just to get face to face because as
For
developers,
a remote team
yeah,
like
yeah,
yours. Yeah.
we are highly collaborative in the work that we do. I write code. Someone else modifies that code or builds on that code. It's not
Because you
like,
don't own the code, Tim. It's not
yeah,
yours.
that's,
You're just a steward.
there's a thought there. Maybe that can be developed. But unlike say other teams that may say, hey, we all do the same thing. We all support customers, or we all make sales, or we do similar things with our group. But it's not, even though there's some crossover, like, hey, maybe I pass it. Hey, I can't help this customer anymore. Let me pass it off to you. So there's some collaboration there.
Mhm.
But all that we do is collaborative, right? I am writing on somebody. I'm either modifying or using somebody else's code. It's good to have a face-to-face with them and kind of get to know that person better than the two-dimensional representation we have of a video screen, right? And just understand a little bit more about them. There's so much value to that. But then the final one is, I want to be there because this is the pool of people I want to hire from. I want to hire people that are going to a conference because they want to get better at what they do. Like, this is exactly my target audience for hiring. Are we hiring right now? No. But I want to meet people there.
Make connections, yeah.
And that's the other thing, like this idea that somehow magically the best way, when I need to hire new developers, the best method is to find developers who are looking for work. No, not really. I don't need to find somehow this confluence of, oh, you don't have a job and I need someone to have. How about you don't like your job and you want to work at a team that recognizes the value of getting better together? Just wait there for a while. We'll be hiring. Let me know it. And then one day I'll say, hey, you want to make the move? And that to me is a much better hiring methodology than just saying, well, who out there is looking for work right now?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that you can't find a good dev that way, but I don't want to say, hey, we're hiring, just have people like, oh, I need a job right now. That's, to me, is not the best qualification of you coming to work with the team that we're,
especially for a smaller team. Because wait, how many developers do you have?
It depends on whether you count ops or something like that, but we're in like that 10 to 15 range, right?
So that's a very small team. Yeah. So you're very selective in a sense. So if you're going to be adding another one to your team, you have a good number of qualifications they have to not only met from a skill level, but also that they're going to fit in as a team member. So
yeah, and I don't want it just simply to be the set of people that go, oh, I don't have a job. You need a person. All right, this is the pool that we're going to look at. No, I want to look at the pool of people who have jobs but recognize they want something different. And if I can make that connection now, if I can establish that relationship now, and they can say, yeah, next time you guys are hiring, let me know. That to me is a huge win. It's a huge win.
It'll be interesting once you come back from PHP Tech. Actually, when you meet the different developers, just kind of in passing conversations, I'm curious to your sense of how many developers went there that may have been working full time, may have gotten laid off, or just they're in a transition and actually went to PHP Tech looking to make those connections
Yeah. No, we'll have at least a sense of that because we are sponsoring it as well. So we're sponsors. We'll have a table there. We can scan people's badges for the purpose of saying, hey, you want to work with us one day? Let me scan your badge, and I'll put you on the list of people that we will contact when we're looking for work again. So, but yeah, that was the article.
Yeah, I thought it was good. Like, I also like the fact you kind of made it very personal. Like, you referenced some of the members of your team by first name.
Yeah.
Which I kind of like that in articles because it makes it feel like it's real, it's personal. It's not written by the AI.
Yeah, it was not. Actually, I gave it to ChatGPT. I was like, hey, ChatGPT, what could I do here to make this better? And it's like, ChatGPT is like, you went on a little bit, Tim. I think you could summarize it. There's a lot of.
Did it actually tell you to write shorter?
Yeah, it said write shorter. And I think it's my gut says, I don't know. My gut says it's exactly that part that you're talking about, that it thinks that was just
not needed.
Yeah, you didn't need to go into all those little details about people. It's like, I did. That was intentional. It didn't, you look at the whole article, you're like, well, it didn't make the point any better. It does. It just didn't make it the way you think it should be made. So, but that was ChatGPT's recommendation is, let's tighten this up a little bit.
I've been seeing the same thing where, like, it's nice to, let's say, if you only give it 2 or 3 sentences and it's like, write me 2 or 3 paragraphs on this, actually, that does a good job. But if you give it pretty much a completed kind of set of document that you want to just basically just format or just kind of proofread, it does. I don't know. I'm not like it how it changes some of the structure. Yeah, it does personalize it a little bit less.
Yep.
Yeah, I have seen that too.
Well, next week, I don't know. There's one thing I want to do this week, but we only got 37 seconds, and I wanted to pitch the beginning of the How It Works talk that I'll be co-hosting at Tech,
So
where I'm going to try to do Hypermedia in 60 seconds, but we only have 24 seconds.
So,
maybe...
next Friday's the 5th. Are you going to be there? What's the
no, it's not. It's a couple weeks away still.
So okay, all right, we'll do it next week.
So we'll do next week, and maybe I'll talk about another talk.
Yeah, because I won't be teaching more, so I don't want anybody to talk about right now. So yeah. We'll leave next week's shows up to you instead, unless I do an interview or something like that I could talk about. We'll see.
Oh yeah, you talked about that last week. You want to change it to interview style now?
I need the prep, Tim. You got to prep me. I need some help.
All righty. Well,
maybe we're going to do some programming questions. Talk about some algorithms, some big O notation.
I'll be terrible at all that. What do I know? I'm a manager. Anyway. All right, I'm going to end this stream for those who are watching online. Oh wait.
Now, did you play the bump? Okay, the one thing I didn't have time to talk with. I didn't want to interrupt your intro. I did not hear the music at all. So if I was talking over the music there at the end, I did it because I didn't hear it. So and I didn't hear it in the beginning either. So I probably should have said something to you because then you might have double checked that towards the end. But I totally forgot about.
You're right. It's taking my direct. This is Yep. So now you'll hear it though. Like if I start it, you'll hear it.
Yeah, I hear now. Yeah.
Okay, so
maybe we'll do next time when we meet up like 2 minutes before we start. I'll ask you to do a little like music test.
Yeah, it's just what happened is I swapped out the dock from my Surface Studio laptop thingy mabob. So I think all my USB stuff got reset, and it defaulted to the way I have this is. I record using I don't know what you want to call it. It's a DAC, essentially. It's just a mic input, right? Like one of those fancy, plug me in on a USB sound card that takes in XLR input. I record that directly, but then I pipe it back out to my mixer that pulls in stuff from the other computers and stuff like that. So the recording that I'm doing is right from the mic.
Yeah.
But I want the mix so I can pull in all my other sources to do the live show. Because then we just take the clean recording and merge it after the fact. So it doesn't, like clean recording doesn't have any audio.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, when I looked at here, yes, it took that sound card and not the sound card that gets the mix. So that's why. Yep. Right. Well, sorry folks who are watching the live stream. Listen to the podcast. It'll have bumper music.
I'll have to listen to myself so I can hear the bumper music for the first time.
Yeah, you will. But you listen to yourself anyway. So
I'm trying to do less. I'm trying to. Did you see my tweet about? I'm trying to be on. I'm trying to go to a media diet. Maybe my media diet should also be. I should stop watching myself.
So no, you're not going to watch YouTube.
I'm trying. Yeah, I'm looking at
no more news. No more podcasts.
I'm trying to. Actually, I've been doing that. I cut out all the past couple weeks. I've cut out all podcasts because I used to listen to podcasts every day to and from work.
Yeah.
Right. I used to a good amount of them. That also YouTube at home, I'm trying to cut out the things I was doing a lot that I feel like was adding too much information to my brain.
Okay.
Because I'm trying to limit, and I feel actually my head's a little more clear. So I'm like kind of more focused on, more important things rather than just kind of getting a lot of inputs coming in from a lot of different sources.
I can see that. Yeah.
So even though I like being aware of what's going on in the world, and I like seeing people's opinions. Also thinking about my summer, like what I want to try to accomplish this summer. I think I've done enough YouTube watching, enough podcast listening about the topic that I need to work on this summer. Okay. That I think I'm kind of done. I don't think I can listen to anybody else's perspective. I just need to do it. Right? You get that point where like you feel like you did enough research.
Yeah.
Then it's just a matter of just doing it, or else what's the whole point of keep trying to learn about it if you aren't actually applying anything? Going back to what we're talking about from an educational standpoint.
Yeah.
So trying to limit the input. So maybe I should limit my own watching myself. I don't do that as much anymore. All right.
I'm trying to wrangle you a Blue Sky invite. We'll see if you get.
Oh yeah, please do. I do, because one thing I'm really excited about that. Do you like I totally agree the protocol, but also I love about the aspect of the protocol that I really like is that's tied to your domain.
It can be, yeah.
So I love that because then
I haven't set that up.
It opens the door to integrating better with personal websites or just keeping your content regard to your own domain. I think that's a really, really cool thing. So yeah, I really want to try that out. So if you go to PHP Tech, if you see anybody else giving out invites, grab one for me.
Yeah, I don't have any invites yet, but I pinged the guy who gave me one and see if he has another one for you. Yeah, what do you want to talk about next week? Because we've been doing this thing.
Well,
where
we'll do the same. Do
we-
this what you're alluding to, because this is gonna be the
Okay.
1 week before your conference, right?
Well, I think it's 2 weeks. It's 2 weeks.
Oh, 2 weeks? Oh, then okay. Well, then I'll start take the whole show about that.
Yeah, yep, because it's the 5th and then the 12th.
Well, what was the topic about the show, about your talk?
Hypermedia in 60
Oh,
seconds.
Hypermedia. Yes, I actually don't know too much about Hypermedia, so yeah, we can talk about it.
We've talked about it a little bit before.
Yeah,
but
I definitely haven't done too much with it, so that'd be good to talk about.
Because there's a talk that we're doing, and it's going to be practical, like how we are using Hypermedia.
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk about HADOS or Hypermedia in general, I feel like there's a big disconnect between what it really is and kind of like people think it's supposed to be. But since we're giving a talk on how we're practically using it, I just want to set the base of, well, this is what it is. So I'm kicking the talk off, hopefully, at least in my notes, I have this notion of Hypermedia in 60 seconds. And just to see if I can very clearly convey what it is in that time frame. Because the truth is, like, RESTful APIs and Hypermedias itself, like, the goal, the thing that was trying to solve was web scale problems, like large scale problems. And it's a great solution for that. But then you can ask, well, we don't have web scale problems. We're just an app that needs an API to communicate with the clients. Does it help us? And that's what the talk's about. The talk shows how us using those concepts makes it better for us, even though we're not solving these web scale problems. So
I don't want to talk too much about this. Like I said, I heard the term before. I haven't looked it up, and it's been a long time since I looked into it. But just my base memory, is it just basically just a closure for content?
No, I think you're thinking
HyperCard.
Yeah.
Maybe HyperCards. So I know nothing about Hypermedia then. So I only know a little bit about HyperCard.
You do. I mean, it's really simple.
All right. Well, that'll be good. You could sell it to me in 60 seconds and see if I understand it.
There we go.
And I won't look it up before the show because I'll forget about it right after we get off the line.